Welcome to our deep dive into That Hideous Strength. I'm here with Christian author Daryl Newton, and we are going to dive into this book together.
I'm actually.
And we're back.
He said a deep dive. We're not going to do a deep dive. He's going to stand on the edge of the deep end. I'm going to push him in. So we'll see what happens. I'll wave to him.
Hope I can swim well. Okay. So this is That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. We're going through it. If you guys have not already read it, be aware we are going to be putting some spoilers in this. Just be aware that will be going on throughout this live stream. Just be aware. Although if you have read it, I'd recommend reading again because this is a really deep book, which you do have to read multiple times. Every time I've gone through it, I have discovered something new that I did not catch the first, second, third, fourth, 28th times I've gone through this book. I do really enjoy this book. Okay. So, Daryl, I know you have some quotes. I don't know why I have the Q&A up there. That popped up there on me.
Does that stand for quotes and analysis?
What's an analysis? No, it's supposed to be questions and answers.
That's at the end.
But this is a little bit more loosey-goosey than I normally play it, so we'll be taking chat as we go if anything interesting pops up in the chat. So, first of all, with this book, let's just say our overall impressions. I know we did a review on it already, but Daryl, what was your overall view of this book?
I thought it was good. It was a little bit difficult to read through the first time, but reading through it again is fine. I say difficult because it's not the standard read that you would have today, but there's a lot of insight into how human institutions can be corrupted. And let me just jump in real quick, since this is just a shoot from the hip type of thing, and say that human institutions, I don't know if it was C.S. Lewis who said this or not, but there are three types of kingdoms. There's heavenly kingdoms, there is the earthly kingdom, and then there is the hellish kingdom. Heavenly kingdom gives life. The hellish kingdom wants to destroy or corrupt, where the human kingdom or institutions, because we're in a fallen state, tend toward decay. So whatever institution that you have set up, even within the church itself, can, after 2 generations, 3 generations, deviate from its initial movement, the initial founding that it had, and just end up becoming corrupt and decay. And we see a lot of that within institutions here, in the story, and one in particular, which is really corrupt. But we'll get into that in a minute, I think.
Yes, the so nicely named Nice Institute.
Yes.
Naming conventions are really blatant with how he names things on this one. Really well done. Okay, yeah, so you open up this book. If you're familiar with the first 2 books, you'll definitely be thrown for a little bit of a loop with this one. It's a different style. You're following dual protagonists. That threw me for a loop for a while. Neither of them are Ransom. So that was like, what? Wait, hold on. The first 2 books, you follow this main character, follow the main character, and now he's gone. We have no clue where he is at the beginning of the book, and we're following these 2 random people. I thought, okay, that's just a little bit of the introduction, but that ends up being the book. You're following these 2 characters, and Ransom, although he is there in this book, he's not the main focus. These 2, their relationship, how they deal with the world is. So I think it tells the story through that view, and I think he gets his points across. It's just a little bit wacky.
No, I think it was. I think it was a good method of telling the story because um, instead, in the first two books, Ransom is the guy going for the ride. Literally, in the first one, he is the guy taken for a ride, kidnapped in the ride. The second one, he has more control over his situation, going to Paralandra. But in this one, he ends up being in the driver's seat. So C.S. Lewis takes two other characters that are going along for the ride. One of them is going on along for the ride in Queen Anne's. Sorry, to St. Anne's. That's where he is the head or the leader, and the other, her husband, Mark Studdock, is going for a ride to the nice place, National Institute for Coordinated Experiments, which is not very nice at all.
No.
So yeah, you do, if you go on with the mindset, we talked about this last time, that hey, you're not going to see Ransom right off the bat, but you do see this great contrast between these two, and we did talk about that with the characters they come across and the situations they come. Real big parallel between the two, and rather than you see that happen with Mark. And one of the quotes I want to go through is, it's kind of lengthy, but it's worthwhile taking a look into it, because when he gets there, when he gets more and more into the in crowd, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but once he gets more into the in crowd, he's being pinned down by the fairy Hardcastle, and she is saying, "Hey, listen, this is the way you're going to be doing things here." He's a sociologist, but he ends up writing newspaper articles. And he's saying, well, this is sort of like having an architect sweep the floors. Why am I doing this? And so the quote I'm going to go through, it shows why they chose him to do this. And this is a bit of a compromise on his part. They're asking him to basically lie and manipulate the public. And he's saying, well, wait a minute. I'm here because the National Institute for Coordinated Experiments, it started off as a good idea. Do you know why a lot of people bought into this idea at the beginning?
Well, it was sold as cutting through the red tape. It was sold to have the backing of the state into scientific pursuits, just like war, according to some of the characters in it, just like war has had the backing of the government. Now science is going to have the backing of the government, and it's going to be able to solve all the world's ills and woes because of this focus on science.
Yeah, and this would have rung true, I think, to a lot of the people back then too, because this was published right after the end of World War II. So the Allies had their victory, and you can see the advantage of government coordinated efforts, large scale, to say, hey, we can accomplish things if we do it. And so the idea with the NICE was to take, instead of having individual universities and colleges vie for their grants and do their research and experimentation on their own, what we're going to do is we're going to pull that all together under one umbrella. And you can tell the Brits doing this because there's 4 letters in their acronym and not just 3. This is in the US, it'd be 3-letter acronym. But anyways, 4-letter there. And the NICE pulls it together to say all the funding is going to be channeled through this group. And you can see where one of the dangers of that is, if we were not in a fallen state, yeah, sure, that sounds like a good idea to have you have all the power there. But in our fallen state, when we put all the power together under one umbrella, chances are it's going to be corrupted, and that's what happened in this case too.
Well, absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. That is a proven fact of reality in this fallen world, where if any fallen corrupted creature gets that absolute power, it just makes it worse.
Yeah.
And we are by our very nature currently, we are corrupt.
So I'm going to set up this quote a little bit. So this is, again, Hardcastle, who is in charge of security. And really the security is, they soft pedaled this. It's enforcement. is what her arm is. So she approaches Mark, and he's having a hard time. He doesn't know what his position there really is. He's trying to get on the in crowd. He's not getting a clear idea of what his job description is, what he's supposed to be doing. And then she tells him, "Hey, you've got to do this, and you're going to be putting this misinformation into the paper, so we can control it." And he says, "Well, wait a minute, you can't do that. Why?" Why are you targeting the educated reader? It should be the uneducated reader that you're targeting. And this is what she says. "Why, you fool, it's the educated reader who can be gulled. All our difficulty comes with the others. When did you meet a workman who believes the papers? He takes it for granted that they're all propaganda and skips to the leading articles. He buys the paper for the football results and the little paragraphs about little girls falling out of windows and corpses found in Mayfair Flats. He is our problem. We have to recondition him. But the educated public, the people who read the highbrow weeklies, don't need reconditioning. They're all right already. They believe anything."
He gets, in this book, just heads up, he gets very political. He gets very political in his views. We can definitely see that sort of style. I'd say that this book would be apolitical, at least originally, where he doesn't seem to have one side, right, left. Just in our world, things have shifted.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily a left or right thing. This is about propaganda in general, whether it's propaganda from the government or if it's propaganda from larger institutions like what this is.
Well, even then, even in this, he's pretty clear about it, because a question comes up. He's making all these articles. The main character's making these articles to put them out there. And he's like, "Okay, well, who's going to be printing this stuff?" And Ms. Hardcastle comes back and says, "Well, both."
Yeah,
both sides.
So this is another quote. He says, she says, "Isn't it absolutely essential to keep a fierce left and a fierce right, both on their toes and terrified of each other? That's how we get things done." And I would say, as we see more of a polarization in U.S. and I think outside the U.S. also, more of a polarization in politics between the left and the right, you wonder, is this something else that's going on of divide that is allowing others to control the situation, because there is this division. There's this fierce fight between the two.
And we see this, we've seen this throughout history. Whenever power's been seized, a lot of times before that point, you see them dividing up the people and putting them against each other. This has happened. It happened in Germany. It happened in Italy. There are multiple times throughout history that it's okay. Divide them against it. A lot of times it's fabricated. A lot of times it's being controlled by both sides.
You get to the point where it's reactionary, where one side often responds just because the other side. If one side says, "Well, I like Coke," and the other says, "I hate Coke, I like Pepsi," it just for the sake of being contrary, and whatever, let's say a particular president liked, then all of a sudden now that becomes anathema, and the other side is going to hate whatever it was, even if it didn't make sense.
And that's really, really cancerous to anything, because you can't really have a dialogue with people that are that polarized back and forth, because they can't come to any middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is unfortunately something we've got to be aware of, and C.S. Lewis wrote about that in this. I mean, that is the Nice Institute's strategy.
Yeah, and also you need to be aware of word usage, how words can be changed. If you can change the meaning of a word in a law, and if it's a critical word, then you can change the meaning of the law. let me read another quote for you here. And this again is Hardcastle talking to Mark concerning the propaganda that they want him to write. We want you to write it down, to camouflage it, only for the present, of course. Once the thing gets going, we shouldn't have to bother about the great heart of the British public. We'll make the great heart, whatever we want it to be. But in the meantime, it does make a difference how things are put. For instance, if it were even whispered that the NICE wanted powers to experiment on criminals, you'd have all the old women of both sexes up in arms yapping about humanity. Call it re-education of the maladjusted, and you'll have them all slobbering with delight that the brutal era of retributive punishment has come to an end. The odd thing is the word experiment is unpopular, but the word experimental isn't. You mustn't experiment on children, but put the dear little kiddies in the free education in an experimental school attached to the NICE, and it's all correct.
I think that really does paint a picture, definitely. And again, C.S. Lewis was writing this in 1945 was when this was published. So he was writing about it back then, but yet we can still see those word games being used today, where a word might be unfavorable. So they use just a slightly changed version of that, but it still means the same thing once you actually examine it.
Right. Or change the meaning of a word to mean what you want it to. The English language is very poor in the word love. It means so many different things. I love my dog, I love chocolate, and I love my wife, but I shouldn't love my wife like I love my dog, or vice versa. That would be illegal. And so if we have if somebody comes out with this a phrase like "love is love," that sounds good kind of on the surface, but when you get close and examine and say, no, those meanings mean something totally different. And maybe we should examine what we're saying that love is okay. Because if you say if just every love behind doors is okay, well then pedophilia is okay too. So definitions of words can be extremely important. If you're having a discussion with somebody too, especially if it's a debate or an argument back and forth, it might be good to take a moment at the beginning to define what those words are. You might find that you're talking and arguing cross purposes for the same thing. You both feel the same thing about a particular issue, but then you find out later to say, hey, we're using this word in different contexts, different meaning.
I think that's critical, definitely in any conversation I've had with Muslims, even with other Christians, to make sure that you have the same foundation of those words. You're using the same words to describe the same thing. That's often, a lot of times, I don't come out and say, this is how it is in those conversations. I just ask questions to make sure that we have a common ground. Because if we are both talking about Jesus, and there's a Muslim talking about Jesus, and I'm talking about Jesus, and they say they respect Jesus, I say I respect Jesus, but they are treating Jesus as nothing more than a prophet, that's not the same Jesus I'm talking about.
Right.
So that's a difference in foundation. We have Ellie says pro-choice pro-murder became pro-choice. Yes, they did do that switcheroo.
Yeah. And the same thing with the pro-life side. Anti-abortion became pro-life.
Yes. It is all word games. Same thing, just different choices of words. And Tippy Bear jumped on. Hey, Tippy Bear. Okay. So do we have another quote to...
Yeah. Now this one, this has to do with the theme of the book, I believe, which is showing how we talked earlier about how you have Mark Studdick going one path and his wife. They have kind of an estranged marriage. It's a marriage, at least a marriage on rocks. she's taking a different path. And it shows how they go down into these two institutions, and one is corrupt, one is not. For Mark, he goes into the NICE, and well, here's another concept. We talked about how they have the different names. You have Hardcastle and Ironwood. Hardcastle is in the NICE. Ironwood, something natural, is at St. Anne's. Another example for contrast was Jane takes the slow train to St. Anne's, while Mark takes this fast car ride. He's not driving, but driving recklessly in this car, even running over a chicken. I don't know if you caught that or not.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Chicken burger.
A little bit of roadkill there. The further Mark gets into the crowd at the NICE, the more corrupt the characters become. When he first starts, there's Curry and Busby, and these are kind of like, whatever. They're just these guys, and then he starts meeting the more disenfranchised, the more sullen, the more angry characters that are in there, until he finally gets into the inner circle, and they want him to turn against his country. They want to turn against his family, bring his wife in, demanding that they bring Jane in, that he bring Jane in. And he's making excuses, saying, well, she's not feeling well, you don't really want to do this. And they really are doing. Now, the reason why they're doing, do you remember what they were doing that for?
The reason why they are doing that is Jane, and this is something that happens very early in the story, almost right off the bat, is starting to get these dreams of things that are going on or things that are to pass. So she's a dreamer. She's able to see things that would be critical to either side.
Right. Yeah, they want to be able to use her prophetic or clairvoyant dreams, use her ability. There's a guy named Dr. David C. Downing. He's with the C.S. Lewis Institute. He pointed out that this is similar. Going into this institution that Mark is doing, getting deeper and deeper into these guys, and they're becoming more and more corrupt. He said that this is similar to the descent into hell in Dante's Inferno, which C.S. Lewis was a fan of.
I can see that.
You get to the point where Mark is being asked to do something and basically be selling his soul. It's a point. It's like a line that is drawn, and he is not only being encouraged to do so, he's being demanded. You have to do this. You have to do this to get to the next step. And so this, let me just, I don't know if I want to do the quote just yet. Yeah, I'll do the quote. So this is out towards the end of the book, and he is brought into this room by Professor Augustus, I think it's his first name, Augustus Frost, who is a psychologist, and he's on the inner circle. So Mark has finally made it into the inner circle, and we'll talk a minute about this whole concept of inner circle here in a minute. He said, meanwhile, in the objective room, where the candidates are taught to think properly, something like a crisis developed between Mark and Professor Frost. As soon as they arrived there, Mark saw the table that had been drawn back. On the floor lay a large crucifix, almost life-size, a work of art in the Spanish tradition, ghastly and realistic. "We have half an hour to pursue our exercises," said Frost, looking at his watch. Then he instructed Mark to trample on it and insult it in other ways. Now, whereas Jane had abandoned Christianity early in childhood, along with her belief in fairies and Santa Claus, Mark had never believed at all. At this moment, therefore, it crossed his mind for the very first time that there might be conceivably something about it. Frost, who was watching him carefully, knew perfectly well that this might be the result of the present experiment. He knew it for very good reason, that he had briefly experimented and dismissed the same thought during his own initiation. So this is an initiation ritual that he's going through, even though it's at the very end. It's like, you have to do this, and then you're going to be brought into the inner circle. "But look here," said Mark. "What is it?" said Frost. "Pray be quick. We have only a limited time at our disposal." "This," said Mark, pointing at the undefined reluctance to the horrible white figure on the cross. This is surely all pure superstition. Well, if so, then what is their objective about trampling on the face? Isn't it just subjective to spit on the thing as it is to worship it? I mean, darn it all, if it's just a bit of wood, why do anything about it at all? That is superficial. If you had been brought up in a non-Christian society, you would not be asked to do this. Of course, it is superstition. But it is that particular superstition which has pressed upon our society for a great many centuries. It is experimentally shown that it still forms a dominant system in the subconscious minds of many individuals. Though it appears to be wholly, even though the individual appears to be wholly liberated. An explicit action in the reverse direction is therefore necessary towards a step of complete objectivity. It is not a question for a priori discussion. We find it in practice that it cannot be dispensed with. What do you think about that?
I think you're thinking it through way too logically. You have good points. I mean, if this is nothing but a superstition, why should I have to defame it? Why should I have to mark it up if this is nothing more than a myth?
Yeah. So this. I see this in our society. Let me ask you this. Let me just put it as a question to you. Do you see this as something in our own society?
I've seen it in situations where you have to specifically deny the deity of Christ. You have to specifically deny Christ in order to join certain groups.
Yeah. So why would they, if indeed Christianity, Jesus Christ, is nothing more than a myth, superstition, silly fancy, why target it with such vehemence in our society?
There's no secular logic to it. I mean, you could try to use that argument, which like, well, it's because it's part of the culture. We need to make sure that this part isn't in you anymore. So we're going to go ahead and defame it, do something that would be obviously defaming it in order to prove to us that you're not under this yoke. But at the same time, so what? If it's nothing, if the Bible is just a book, who cares? If the cross and Jesus being on the cross is nothing more than metal and wood, who cares? It would be ridiculous for someone to be stamping on the cross like that.
You could almost look at this and say this is almost a proof for Christianity. If it was nothing more than like a belief in Santa Claus, then why is there such a push against it? We don't have anti Santa Claus groups, but we do have anti-Christian groups. You don't go into college and they try to wash the Santa Claus out of you. Yet if you go into college, they'll try to, either reason or shame Christ out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't have a particular axe to grind against universities, although there are a lot of problems. I've spent enough years at university and gotten some good things out of it. So I'm not backtrack a little bit on that, saying, listen, I don't have an axe to grind against that. Although there are some issues within universities of being anti-Christian that do need to be dealt with.
And I think C.S. Lewis was pretty clear about that as well, that he didn't just target universities, although he does use a university in this book. That was just what he was most familiar with.
Right.
He said that, other jobs could be just as vulnerable as university. University is just what he knows the best. So he wrote what he knew in this case. Just want to clarify that point. But if we take it, and it's really, there's just so much in this book from beginning to end. There's a lot in it. And it starts off, again, at the very, very, very beginning, where you're seeing this split between nature and progress. I mean, you go to college and he's immediately inside the progressive element, and they're talking about getting rid of the nature that's around the university, this whole natural wooded area. They want to sell it off, and it's very manipulative. It's very obviously manipulating the minds of the faculty in order to get them to sell. They put out a bunch of things, say, hey, we would really like to increase your salary, but we just have to spend so much money on this wall here to go around this woods. So we really can't do that. And they're putting all this stuff in front of them before lunch, get that in their mind, working on them. And then afterwards, boom, they put forth, hey, we can sell the woods. It would remove the issue of the wall, and we would be able to increase everyone's salary and be able to pay all these other projects we want to do. So it was very, and since our main character was on the inside, we saw that they were purposefully putting it forth in this way so that they would manipulate the people into thinking that this is not only a solution, it is their only solution. This was their only option. They have to get rid of it. And if the crazies, the people who want to keep the woods, want to keep the history of the university alive, those people were crazies who just wanted to put barbed wire fence around the entire woods.
So what do you think? This is a bit of change of subject. What do you think about the? He spoke about relativism in this book. Not so much using the term relativism, but the idea that people can define their own definition of moral good or beauty. Beauty can be defined in the eye of the beholder, but there's a lot to be said about absolute beauty. Anybody looks up at the stars or in a certain natural scene, be awed by what they see. Lewis talked about that here in the book. What do you think about how the NICE approached morality?
Morality, they came from, again, it's a personal morality, being able to define it yourself. The problem with that is who defines it. Well, I define it. Well, if I am, say, a psychopath, I define my morality, and everyone else can die and it'd still be a moral good. Whatever I want would become a moral good. You can look at it that way. You could also look at it culturally, whatever or even humankind, whatever would be great for humankind. I think that would be more along the NICE's views, is whatever would be good for humanity, therefore is good for everything. I'd say the guy who looked at the moon and said, look how beautiful it is. Everything's dead.
Yeah.
We should wipe out everything. That way, humanity is the
Right.
only thing. We've got to get rid of all organic nature so that we can progress as a species. And the problem with that is, again, it's not absolute morality. It is only relative. And once you apply relative morality, you can get away with any sort of war crime. Can be justified under that. According to Hitler, he was morally correct to kill the Jews. Well, if you're talking about a personal morality, well, then, yeah, it would be according to that viewpoint.
It was right for him. It was his truth.
It was his truth, so he could do it.
Yeah.
But I would look at that and say, no, murdering kids is still bad, no matter who you are.
So there's a couple of essays that highly influenced the writing of this book. One was The Abolition of Man, the C.S. Lewis. He wrote both. And the other one was Men Without Chests. And at first, when I first heard the title "Men Without Chests," I thought, oh, he's talking about weak men. Can't do push-ups. No, that's not what he was talking about. He was actually referencing Aristotle, who he was talking about three different positions on us anatomically. He said the gut has the drive for appetite, and not just hunger, but other appetites, ambition, sexual drive, things like that, and not necessarily to be all centered there, but that it'd be associated. He's just using a word picture. Another location would be the head, the center for reason, and the chest, the heart area. He was talking about the ability to judge beauty and moral goodness. He says we have. C.S. Lewis was talking about a time that we have entered where we have our appetites, and there is some form of reason, but we have lost any anchor with morality or understanding of beauty. And so that's one thing you see reflected in this book. The NICE wants to flatten everything. You even take the human body itself, chop off the head. All that stuff is unnecessary. We just want the head, and the macrobes are involved, and whatever's going on beyond that, and we know who the macrobes are if you've read the book. So that is the ideal, where God and Ransom and St. Anne's, those involved with St. Anne's, were looking at beauty, and even beauty and procreation through the sexes, natural beauty that was going on, and also natural morality. And one thing that's very clear with all this is you see the end result. One is a death cult. The other brings life. So in a lecture to a group of undergraduates, C.S. Lewis warned them to watch out for the inner ring. There's a little bit of change of subject here, but he's talking about how what drove Mark Studdick in this book was what he was warning these undergraduates in his lecture about this inner ring. He said that to these students, he said, be very careful about climbing the ladder of ambition. He says it starts with this in the schoolyard, where you want to be in the in crowd or with the cool kids, and you need to. One way to do that is to make fun of the other kids that are not in the in crowd, and then you can get in. And the same thing happens early in your career. The temptation is to exclude the outer circle to be included in the inner circle. And you're often asked to make moral compromises to climb that career ladder in order to get into the inner ring.
We see that another aspect of that, the inner circle, could be special knowledge that's only obtained through the inner circle. And if you're part of this special knowledge inner circle, then you are the enlightened. You know what's best. This is very dangerous, definitely in religion, even. You see this in a lot of cults. A lot of cults will call out to people saying, hey, we've got this special knowledge here about God. And if you know the special knowledge, and you're part of this inner circle of special people.
Yeah. So
you need to come join us in this. And I've seen that in multiple different ways and sold to people in multiple different ways of how to really go astray.
You'll even see that in Christianity, that you'll have those who are in the elite. It's something we need to all guard ourselves against. Jesus' disciples had that inner squabbling. A couple of the mother of a couple of his disciples came up and said, hey, when you get to heaven, can you have my boy sit at your right hand? And Jesus looked at him and said, woman, you don't know what you're asking. Basically, is there crucifixion in this line? Because these boys here, do you want them to be crucified? So the inner circle, the desire for that, is really no part in Christianity. Now, Jesus did have the 120, he did have the 12, and he did have the 3 top disciples. But it was more with drawing together, and that love and grace that he has extends to all Christians. So there really is no, hey, I have a master's in divinity, therefore I'm closer to God. No, you're more responsible for what you know now. And we're all asked to have humility. And that is part of God's kingdom, not necessarily part of the earth's kingdom.
Well, going on, pulling it to another topic that this book talks about, actually going back to Jane. We haven't talked too much about her. One of her major faults is, and it's very apparent as I was going back through this book, it really stuck out to me. There's quite a few times that C.S. Lewis is referring to this. She doesn't want children. She sees children as nothing more than something that would weigh you down. She's a very progressive woman in this regard, where she wants to focus on her career, her job, and maybe eventually get to the kids, get to those eventually. But right now, she's going to focus on this career, this job. And multiple times she looks at this and says, wow, I'm glad I don't have kids because it would have, halted me, or I wouldn't be as free as I am. She does not want to submit to her husband. She doesn't want to work in that way. She wants to be her own person. She wants to be a strong, independent woman, which again is at this time in 1945, is a very new concept that's being put forth. And we definitely are seeing the fruits of that here now.
Yeah, I think one of the sinister lies about that is that if you're a mother, you are not a strong woman. Any mother can tell you, you must be strong of character to be able to put up with the toddler's tantrums, or discipline the toddler there, or a newborn's cry all through the night. There is a lot, the struggle for knowing that how am I going to handle all this stuff. There is a real strength of character that comes through motherhood. So as far as a strong female character that you can only get strength through career, no. There are many selfish people of both sexes that are on the top of the ladder in their careers.
And I think there's a big lie to that whole wait until later section for women, because your internal clock's ticking. Women's internal clocks tick, and by the age of 30, you are going to have a hard time getting pregnant. Well, you've got, if memory serves, 15% of your eggs left by age 30. By age 35, you're down to 5%. You do not have long after the age of 30 to get pregnant. Now, I'm not saying that that's overall, I'm saying averages. So there are always outliers to that.
Well, I tell you what, I am over 45, and I don't have any eggs left. So
I don't think that's ever been a problem for you.
I think you're probably right about that. Yeah.
But then again, what is a woman?
Stop. Stop. Don't even go there.
Already addressed that in a short. You guys can go look at that.
So I think there are a lot of things that in this particular book, it's funny. If you look back over the space trilogy, you could see where the first is exploring Mars, and a totally different tone than where we end up. Paralandra, you have the struggle between light and darkness in trying to corrupt or help rescue this new sentient race that's there. And then you finally end up on Earth and showing the struggle at possibly the end of the age between light and darkness, and then bringing, well, we didn't even talk about bringing all the other Eldil down from.
We haven't got that far.
No.
We haven't even touched Merlin. Merlin was cool. I love Merlin. Yeah. He's got to be my number 2 as far as cool characters in this book. The number 1 was a bear. I love me that bear. It's good. It's some good comic relief.
Mr. I think Belvedere. That's not what it was. What was his name? Mr.
I don't remember.
Oh, I gotta look that up. Okay, I'm gonna look that
While you're looking that up. Yes, so my favorite character would be the bear. But the twist with Merlin being on the good guy's side, and there's not much they have to do about it. There's a big suspense, sort of, we've got to get to Merlin first. This guy's going to wake up. He's going to come, and if the NICE gets to him first, then they're going to corrupt him. And oh my, what happens? Well, there is someone who shows up at the NIC that looks like he's a Merlin. Looks like he's sort of a vagabond, long beard, fits the description of Merlin. They take him in, ends up being a homeless dude who just basically thinks they're a bunch of idiots, and he's just there eating all their food, which is hilarious. But at the same time, the real Merlin shows up at the good guy's place. He's welcomed in. There's a little bit of miscommunication on that, a little bit of that, but all in all, he is on the good guy's side. He's firmly on the good guy's side. There's never even a question in his mind about joining the bad guys. It's like, no, I never do that. So it's interesting to see that already set up. So even since the very beginning of the book, one of the main struggles was already solved. And then they go into this situation with the Eldil coming to Earth. And I believe you want to touch on that. Have you been able to find the bear's name?
No, I'm still looking it up.
If you guys can find it, can you do me a favor?
Multitude. Mr. Multitude.
Mr. Multitude.
That's
okay.
What it is. Sorry.
That works.
Yeah.
Mr. Multitude.
Yeah,
yes.
a little comic relief. I love that bear.
Mr. and Mrs. Multitude.
Well, eventually Mrs. Multitude, yes.
Fantastic. It's great.
So I wasn't going to really comment on the Eldil and descending, although I would say that a lot of that has to do with his study in medieval literature coming in.
It's interesting how he depicts each of them as sort of their Roman parallel or Greek parallel. So each one would be, Mars. You've got someone who's strong, warlike.
So that would be Roman.
Roman. But then he was basically taken from Greek mythology.
Right.
Just
He's using his Roman names.
Yeah, Roman names. And then you've got Venus, who comes in and is very loving, very sort of lovey-dovey.
Well, he did mention when Ransom first I wouldn't say confronted, but when he first met Merlin, and that was a cool meeting, I think, when they first met each other.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were testing each other. And you're rooting for Ransom. And Merlin first meets him. It's like, okay, you're a servant. Go get your real master. And Ransom said, well, this. And he started answering him in different languages. And finally started using the solar language. And he said, your masters let you play with some dangerous toys by teaching you that language. And so as Ransom is answering Merlin's questions, Merlin's respect for him goes up and up. And finally, it's like, whoa, I'm talking to the one dude. You are the Pendragon. And I thought that was a pretty cool conversation. But
that really pulls together, that conversation really pulls together the other books where he's saying, hey, I learned to speak the solar language from Mars. I went there personally and learned it directly from them. And then I went to Venus over here and learned about that stuff over here directly from Venus itself.
Right. And so what he learned from Venus was he learned war. And I thought he was going to say he learned war on Mars because Mars is a god of war. But that's not what it was. Actually, his physical struggle, was on Venus, Paralandra. So it's interesting that he learned there, but Venus, Paralandra would be associated more with love.
Yeah, and then you've got so you got them come down. Then you had the more abstract ones coming, which was like Venus. It was Jupiter and Saturn coming down as well, and those were more abstract and harder for them to associate with because they were older, from an even older time frame. So all in all, I think this last book did a great job on tying together all the loose ends from the other ones and pulling them in and making it feel like all those, even though there are different writing styles, were all critical in this final battle.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth looking at the role of medieval literature in the planets in C.S. Lewis's writings. There's something called the Song of the Spheres, I believe, that came out right before he had written the space trilogy. And I was just trying to find it. There's another book that's out. I started reading it. It's on C.S. Lewis and the planets. And it was well written. And if you give me a minute, I can maybe find out where it
Sure,
happens.
go ahead and take a look at that.
Do you have any questions or anything like that that come up?
No, I have not yet. But real quick, guys, if you guys want to, we normally do these reviews once a month. We're doing a special live stream just because this book was so good. and we really had to take it apart. And I grabbed the wrong side. This book right here. Fantastic book. There's a lot in it, a lot we still haven't even touched. And even all the stuff that we have touched so far barely scrapes the surface of what C.S. Lewis has put together here. So I'd highly recommend you guys go read it for yourselves. I do want to congratulate Levi for winning the next giveaway that we gave away this book. He won that. If you want to enter into that, you need to subscribe, like this video, and go into the description there. You can find the link to Daryl's newsletter, and he will go ahead, enter in for that. You need name and or username, whatever you want to put in there, and your email. And that will allow us to send you an ebook version of the next book that we'll be hitting. And we will be hitting 30 AD by Ted Dekker next month. We'll be doing that one in these reviews.
Yeah. And can I give a quick plug, by the way?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so
one more thing on that.
My newsletter, you're also going to be privileged to knowing there's a new book that I have coming out. It's called The Healing Stone. It's slated to come out towards the end of July. If things go well, there's a couple of things that might actually be holding the release back, but as you can see, it is finished. It's a historical science fiction book about a boy in medieval Spain who is an orphan who inherits a stone that can heal anything. And he finds out later that it's actually much more than that, and the original owners of the stone come looking for them. It's the first in a series, and each of them, somebody finds a special thing, and then they get involved in this temporal war. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you also have information about that's coming out.
And if you guys have followed my channel for any length of time, you know we do a lot of book reviews with some authors. We will be doing a special giveaway and review of that book as well. Just want to let you know, though, if you enter in for the newsletter, you are entered to win every book we review. We review one book a month. So that is the possibility of winning up to 12 books in the next year. It's a randomly selected giveaway, so who knows?
I did find that book, by the way, the one I was looking for, and it's written by Michael Ward, W-A-R-D. It's not just about the planets in general. It's about Narnia, believe it or not.
Narnia?
Oh, yeah. It's called Planet Narnia, the Seven Heavens in the Imagination of C.S. Lewis. And he takes a look at how each of the books of the Chronicles of Narnia actually reflect a different planet. It's an interesting take on it. And you say, well, there's 9 planets, actually 8 now because Pluto got booted. But at the time, in medieval literature, I believe that's why they only counted 7. But anyway, that was an interesting book, and I think it also reflects on what happens at the end of that hideous strength.
Okay, so we have the Oyasu's coming down. They've entered in. Merlin takes them on as far as their powers go ahead and basically acts as their avatar on Earth. Then we switch back to the NICE, and the final battle has begun. Merlin walks in, and it is extremely entertaining.
Yeah. So this is a reverse, again, of languages. C.S. Lewis is very keen on languages here, written this for J.R.R. Tolkien. And the main character is based off of Tolkien. His background, he's a philologist, which is a fancy way to say a language guy. He's a language expert. And it is no coincidence then that the thing that the NICE gets cursed with is understanding languages. They get flipped. They can't understand each other. So this is an example of the Tower of Babel. And what precipitated the Tower of Babel's curse was hubris. Again, here we're raising up, not as tower, but this institution that is going to throw out God. And he came in and confused their language.
Yep. walks on in, grabs the fake Merlin. It acts like an interpreter for the fake Merlin.
That was a cool move.
It was like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah.
Walks around, walks into the main group and just confuses them. The animals that they were looking at doing experiments on and cutting up and trying to do anything they could because they got rid of all the red tape so they could do whatever animal cruelty they wanted to. There was no requirements.
Thanks, Jurassic Park.
Extremely Jurassic Park. Animals get loose. People die. Very happy feelings.
Yeah.
There's really no retaliation the enemy can do.
Okay.
It's very obvious that because they're acting in God's will, and Merlin comes in God's ability and power, he just wipes the floor with the enemy. And that's what really happens every time God intervenes even at the last battle. We're going to see this where God comes in and it's just doesn't matter what forces you have already. It doesn't matter how much strength you have or what you think you have. The gap between you and God's strength is so overwhelming that there's no way of reaching God's strength.
Right.
And he comes in uncontested, just wipes the floor. I like OP characters, obviously. I got One Punch Man back here. I do enjoy those sort of videos or sort of movies, and it's really cool to see in this book where God steps in and it's annihilation. This does burn up Merlin. Merlin ends up dying at the end of it in a peaceful way, I would say, not like, oh no, very painful way.
Yeah, what do you think about that whole thing with the idea of Britain and the logos they're talking about?
Interesting. It pulls in a lot of the authors.
Arthurian.
Thank you. Arthurian legend. Pulls that in, puts it really well. Very interesting. Definitely on the pulling of the forces, how Merlin was using magic, how he was using sorcery back during his time. And once he gets to the current time in this book, that's no longer available. In fact, there's a time they offers to go do that, and Ransom basically says, no, you can't do that anymore.
Yes.
That was even borderline when you did it.
Yeah.
Now it's absolutely no way
Right.
You're allowed to do that now. It shows the changing of the times, shows the changing of the world, how corruption has continued to degrade it to such a point where it's dangerous to interact on that level anymore. Of course, you've got the wonderful bear go through. He gets kidnapped at a certain point, kind of sweating because it was the NICE that kidnapped him, but that all works out in the end. And he gets himself a little wifey. So, fantastic. Just everything with the enemy's plans. And I think this was a really good point that Ransom showed. And this is true across the board. Whenever we're talking about demonic forces, and that's what they were really fighting against was demonic forces. That if we are fighting against demonic forces, we don't have to win. We don't have to kill the enemy. We don't have to destroy the enemy. All we have to do is the people that are fighting for the enemy, we just have to make them, useless to the enemy. And the enemy devours its own.
Yeah, that was...
Just absolutely crushes itself. In fact, we see that at the very end with the head. In other words, a severed head that demons are talking through. And we see that people start sacrificing themselves. There's basically 3 guys left in the entire NICE, thank you. NICE, and they're basically end up killing each other. And of course the bear comes in and finishes off the last one, which bear gets one. But that's about it. You see the end of Divine, which is he's one of the ones in the very beginning in the very first book that comes through. So we see Divine's death here. We also saw Weston's death in Paralandra, and now we saw Divine's in this one. And they do refer to Weston's death as being a murder that is there. That's one of the things that Divine really focuses on. It says, hey, we used to be able to travel with planets, but now we can't because Weston was murdered by the enemy, and they'll come and they're cutthroat and they'll come after you too. But we know that that wasn't really what happened. Really, his masters got a hold of him completely and therefore ended up devouring him, just like the rest of the nice organization. But it really shows, and I guess this is another point that the nice organization has. They have police that we didn't really focus too much on, and that should be a red flag to anyone. When someone has an independent police force that is able to enforce, not just in the institution, but outside of the institution, and able to stretch their power out. And this is the NICE was not just in England, it was everywhere. There are multiple locations that were springing up all at the same time across the whole world. And they were all, to my knowledge, destroyed at the same exact time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he kind of implies that with the whole blowing up everything bit, and the earth kind of like coming up. And I think that was Divine that died in that, when he was crushed by falling debris.
Lord Featherstone.
Lord Featherstone. That's something that I did not like about this book, was changing his name and introducing a whole bunch, just a zoo full of other characters, and expecting me to memorize all these names and know exactly who was whom. It was a bit of a headache. But there is a nice website that has good images that someone has put together.
We can't share that, can we?
We can share that, yeah. If you want to pull that up on your screen.
Can I?
There should be a share button at the bottom. You should see plus share.
Oh,
you can share your
I could have
screen
done that earlier. Okay, let me see if I can find that then.
Yeah, go ahead and see if you can find it. It is a good reference. I would highly recommend that you guys reread through the book with these images in your mind, because he does such a good job. This artist does such a good job describing these sort of characters. So that's about it. You do see the death of Ransom. Well, sort of death of Ransom. Not really dead. He kind of gets taken back to Paralandra to rest with King Arthur until the final day. So you have a start. On the Silent Planet started with him literally lost. Then he becomes kidnapped, lost on a planet, comes back, goes and helps redeem a planet, comes back to Earth, and carries on his heel the scar from assisting the planet. So as he's looking that up, let me go ahead and open up to a Q&A and talk anything you guys want to talk about. Put that in the chat or any questions you have. And we will cover that. If we don't get anything, then we will just roll right along. I know my wife is muted because she has not yet read this book.
You see my screen?
Fantastic. Yes, I do. And let's go ahead.
So this is Behance. I have no idea. I'm guessing this is like DeviantArt. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what this is, but it shows.
I did use the first one in that for the thumbnail of when we did the book review.
I see that.
Just because he did such a good job on it.
Oh, by the way, the glasses he mentions. I think it's spelled pince nez, but it's pronounced pince nez. And these are the glasses that you see in the center section. They're without the arms that come back, so they sort of pinch your nose as they're laying on your face. So
I have a hard time keeping those on.
Yeah, well, yeah. So the pince-nez glasses do this, and I think in Lewis's mind, this is sort of like a mark of the elite that they have these sophisticated glasses with French names, pince-nez.
Well, that and you don't have to do hard work because they would just fall off.
Okay, so this is Augustus Frost. This is the one that tried to get Mark at the end that we did the quote from to step on the cross and everything. And as you notice, he is wearing the pince-nez, and he is also the one that his Mark's wife Jane has a couple of visions about. He keeps popping up in the vision. And then you have who is this guy here? He's the French guy, Philostrato. Which I guess he was a eunuch. I didn't catch that when I was reading the book the first time. But he
looks like he's a eunuch.
Wow.
He's got those eyes, man. Those eyes have seen some stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
He's a guy who is keeping the head alive, or at least he thinks he's keeping the head alive. And the head is not actually alive anymore. It's just the macrobes that are working through it, the demons that are working through it. And here we have the head. Somebody did some 3D images of this guy who put this up. And there's Jane Studdick and Miss Hardcastle, and she looks like a force to be reckoned with. Mark Studdick and Merlin. And so all of these...
Merlin looks so like just whatever with it. He does cool animation now. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so I should give this guy recognition. Who's the artist here? Does it say?
Say up there. I can't. Don't see it on my screen.
I'm looking for the name. I want to give credit for this guy.
Well, I will put the link to this in the description at least. Well, if you scroll up a little bit.
Does he have
his signature up top there? No, it just says Miss Hardcastle. Nope, not on the bottom either. Darn it. And I want to give this guy some recognition.
I know. Oh, there you go.
Okay, fantastic.
JP Cokes.
Did a great job with this. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Should help keep your guys' minds straight on who is
who. Who is who on here. It helps with the characters. Okay, so...
And he's got some pretty fantastic art there.
How in the world do I stop sharing this? There we go. Stop sharing. Got it.
Yeah, I could just remove it on my end as well.
There.
Okay, so that is that hideous strength. Again, we're wrapping it up for today. All right, is there any other quotes you want to go over?
No, I'm looking forward to 8030. I think that'll be good. I've read it before, and it does have a sequel, 8033.
And we'll be covering those. So those will be the next two books that we will be covering in our book reviews.
Those are written by Ted Decker, and his approach was this is historical fiction about a woman who is she's Bedouin and meets Jesus during his time. So he tried to keep it very historically accurate. And I think all the quotes that Jesus gives in this book are actual quotes from Jesus in the Bible. He didn't put any other words into our Savior's mouth, which is probably a pretty smart thing. And hard to do as an author. I mean, when you go look at it and you're doing historical fiction, you have to fill it out somehow. And so he was careful on not doing that with Jesus.
So those will be the next books that we're doing. We'll be looking at other books after that. If you guys have any suggestions of books that you think should be reviewed, either Christian books or even non-Christian books, something that's popular that we should take a Christian perspective and dive in and see if there's any good to be drawn out of it, or if it's just something for entertainment, or if it's even something that we really should stay away from because there are bad teachings within it. Please leave those down in the description below. We'll take a look at that and really dive in and tear it apart for you guys. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this series as much as Daryl and I have. It has been an absolute blast. I truly do love C.S. Lewis's writings. I think that they are mind-blowing and really well put together, and there's always deep theological questions that are brought up and answered in these. So thank you so much. And we will go ahead and end in prayer. Lord of heaven and earth, we thank you for the opportunity to dive through these books. Thank you for your wisdom and your guidance. Thank you for your reassuring that we, in the end, when everything is said and done, you address every wrong, every issue, that you have the final word, and that in the end, even if it looks like the enemy is getting away with stuff currently, that he will get his just rewards in the end, according to your will and your glory. I ask for your hand to be upon friend B, as he is still dealing with some family issues as far as medical goes. I ask for your hand to be upon him and his family. I ask for your hand to be upon friend V as he continues his search for you. And also upon friend S as his kids are looking for you. I ask for you to guide them and keep them safe in everything that they do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.